Long stroke orbital polishers have taken polishing paint to a higher level. To match the performance of these tools, Lake Country has designed a pad unique to the behavior of the long stroke orbital polisher called their Lake Country HDO pads. Mike Phillips with AutoGeek.com, and I'm here in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, the home of Lake Country Manufacturing, the world's largest pad manufacturer. And we're here with Dave Patterson. He's the technical manager for new product development. Dave, these pads are cool because the new trend in polishing paint are these long stroke orbital polisher. But you've had to design some unique features and benefits in the pads to keep up with the performance of the tools. Can you tell us about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously when the long throw or long stroke polishers came into the market a few years back, it was completely different. It changed the industry a little bit. It changed the pads that were being used, and what you saw with these machines is when they came out, you had a lot of people having pad failures regardless of whose pads they were.
Sure.
They were destroying pads. So our goal was to develop a pad system specifically designed for the performance of a long throw polisher and to be able to withstand that rigorous power that it has.
The punishment they put the pads through.
Punishment, yeah.
Now, one of the things about these long stroke orbital polishers that separate them is that long stroke. Yep. So for an example, this is a Porter cable. Now, this is the tool that kind of started it all back in the early 80s. Before then, we had the rotary, there was the cyclo, and the old gem type polishers. But this is the tool that kind of started the orbital polisher craze that enabled the average person to create a swirl-free finish with virtually no skill.
Yeah.
Okay, but this is what's called an 8mm polisher. Now I'm going to turn this on. As you can see, there's some black dots. You'll kind of get a feel for the small orbit stroke length. And when we talk about orbit stroke length, what we're talking about is the pad rotates and then it makes an orbit inside that rotation. And when we talk about orbit stroke length, that's the size of the orbit stroke, the diameter of that circle inside the larger circle. So watch this. Okay, and you can see that's a fairly tight or a fairly small orbit stroke length. Mm-hmm. Now, here I've got a Bigfoot 15. And the 15, what this stands for is a 15mm orbit stroke length. So it's almost twice the size of the orbit stroke length of the 8mm Porter cable. And as I turn this on, actually, let me pull the pad off and you can see from the cooling ventilation holes the orbit stroke length of this tool. And so with that increased movement over the surface basically is what this is doing. It puts a lot of stress on the pads. And this is true when you're first starting out, but also as they start to get wet with product as it soaks into the pad. So can you maybe go into the science of what it takes to make a pad that will work with these tools that have these really large orbit stroke lengths? Yeah,
absolutely. So one of the things is obviously heat. When you're working with a long throw polisher, they have a large orbit or a large movement in their stroke, and that can create a lot of heat. It creates a lot of friction on the surface. It's dragging across that surface. But at the same time, you also have heat being created inside the pad. And that's caused by the foam going back and forth. So what we did was we try to utilize the idea of thin as in, like you would say, and try to bring that concept to the large stroke machine, because thin pads work great, but one of the things that's a challenge is they don't necessarily work on contours and curves as well as a thicker pad, and partially that's just based on weight. So not only the weight, but the distribution of the weight. So when you're working in these areas, sometimes a thin pad can have issues stalling, and it takes a lot of skill to be able to maneuver it and make it work. So what we get is we get all those benefits out of that thin pad, but we have the weight and the weight distribution of a full-size pad. That combined with our foam technology and the idea of that dual density backing helps the performance of that a lot.
So that the dual density, you're talking about the two different colors I see here in these pads.
Yep.
So this, I can tell that this gray section of foam here, it's actually really stiff.
Yep.
And so that helps with that long orbit stroke length, that torsional torque that's being created against the pad as the backing plate's moving it over the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. It does that along with helps create an even pressure throughout the pad because the outer points, because of the tape, are actually wider than your Velcro or your backing plate, so it helps an even distribution. So then you're also getting the benefit of an exact fit type pad or close to that, but then the benefits of a larger pad where you're not going to damage something as easily either. That combined with those dual layers, along with the thin pad increasing performance, it also reduces the amount of horizontal movement. So when the foam moves, it creates heat just like it creates heat on the surface with friction, except it's a molecular friction. So it's friction on a molecular level. So all those strands are moving back and forth without even the friction of the paint, and those create heat on the inside of the pad too.
Got it. So there's a lot of technology that goes into a pad.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people think foam is foam, but that's really not the case, you know, and that's where, you know, having the people here at Lake Country that know how to create a pad by the different additives that go into the pad, the cell structure, the shape, the design, everything about that to optimize the pads to work with these new style polishers, these long stroke orbital polishers. Now, I see you've got in the HDO line, you've got 4 different foams. It looks like you've got a cutting, a light cutting. I'm guessing this is finishing, and then machine waxing.
Yeah, pretty close to that.
And then over here we've got a microfiber pad. Tell us about this.
So microfiber pads have become more and more popular throughout the the last 4 or 5 years or so, and we utilize this pad because this is what myself and our team here view as what should be a cutting pad for these types of tools. We do have some aggressive foams, and we have some other items that cut very, very well, but one of the things that's unique about microfiber is it cuts very, very well, and it finishes very, very well. Because dual action pads, they can work so well, but when you get into large cell foams, a microfiber pad is typically more effective. But there's always a place for those foams too.
Sure.
But as we look at the detailing industry globally, we see a lot of people turning to microfiber and micro wool type products. So the way that this line is set up is our microfiber is going to be our typical heavy cut, and obviously we start least aggressive first. So we move our way backwards, but this would be our heavy cutting pad. When you get into the blue pad, we utilize this as a light cutting pad, but it's also an all-in-one, and it's a very versatile pad. So it could be used with your compound, it could be used with a finishing polish, or it could be used as an all-in-one type product.
Cleaner wax.
Yeah, like a cleaner wax. This is a great pad for polishing on harder clears, like your ceramic clears, or maybe even some of the US cars like GM and Ford, they have some harder clears.
Yeah, Corvettes are typically known for having very hard clears, and actually Audi has some very hard clears.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a great polishing pad on some of those harder clears. When we get into our orange, this is kind of a light cutting pad, but this is a go-to polishing pad in this line. It'll finish on 9 out of 10 cars that you work on. The only really time that you'd ever need to finish with something other than your orange would be when you need your black on like a Honda, a Subaru, a Porsche, or anything that has soft or what they call sticky paint. This is going to really help finish on those surfaces without micro marring. And obviously, if you're going to that extent, it's usually on a black or a dark colored vehicle where you can actually see that.
And then of course the red pad, for anybody that is out there, they want to machine apply a finishing wax or a finishing sealant, something that has non-cleaning ability.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to share a story, we worked on our TV show, Black Willys, with very soft paint.
Yeah.
And you were there.
Yeah.
You were working on the Camaro with the easy to work on paint.
Yeah.
And it was this black pad that saved the day.
Yep.
Because every other pad combination we tried, no matter what the chemicals, we were seeing micromarring. We switched over to this pad, solved the problem, created a flawless finish on what's the hardest color to perfect?
Single stage black.
Single stage black paint. So it's an amazing pad, and I tell you, that's what's nice about having a range. I know sometimes people might say, well, it's confusing, all the different colors, but you gotta look at these like they're tools in your toolbox. A master mechanic does not use a 12-sided wrench to take a head bolt off. He's gonna get a 6-point socket on there so it doesn't strip the edges of the bolt when he's trying to break something off that's been torqued down. He chooses the specific tool for the job he's trying to do.
Yeah.
And that's what having a nice line of pads enables us as detailers to do, is to choose the right pad for the paint that's in front of us.
Yeah.
And it's always changing. Of course, you never really know unless you've got a lot of experience, or you do what we call a test spot.
Test spot, yeah.
So tell you what, now I see we've got a good selection of some different long stroke tools here, some Orbital tools, and these pads will work with any of these tools.
Yeah, and technically they'll work on all tools. They're great on a rotary, they're great on any type of DA with a center hole or even a forced rotation machine, but ideally the whole line was designed and geared towards these long throw polishers because as the market's grown, in the past, we've had standard product lines and deviated from that, but as the machines change, we're actually designing pads that maximize the performance of machines now.
So specialized tools, specialized pads.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Dave, where can people get more information about the HDO line of Lake Country pads?
Well, they can check it out on our website. It's www.lakecountrymfg, as in manufacturing.com.
You know, when I started out detailing, we really only had like 2 or 3 types of tools. Nowadays, when guys get into detailing, isn't it great they have so many, not only tool options, but pad options?
Yeah, it's an amazing time to be a detailer.
It truly is.
It is. It gives you the options that were never available in the past.
Everything is faster, safer, and easier.
Yeah.
That's what I like about detailing cars.
Yeah, me too.